So I think there has been a lot of speculation online for a little bit now on who the Richmond Football Club could potentially target in the 2025 AFL off-season. Again, a ton of names have been kind of put forward, like a Harley Reid, like a Zach Butters, a lot of really unrealistic names as well that I definitely don't think the Tigers are going to get, and a lot of other rumors and speculation. Again, I think it's been in like the last month or so. Apparently, there have been a couple of rumors going around that the Tigers may have cooled down on this off season and maybe fully trying to focus on the draft and maybe actually trying to keep their salary cap and keep, a lot of options available for next year's free agency and off season that is supposed to be a lot bigger, because that's when you got players like Harley Reid and Zach Butters who will actually be, have their contracts expiring. But again, that hasn't stopped rumors coming out about 2025 and players that the Tigers could potentially target. And I wanted to talk about a post here by the Tiger Faithful Instagram account that does say, Tiger target. I'm not sure whether the club are in love with him and he's in love with the club. So who knows what it looks like for him. Again, that's actually Lee Montagna talking about Zane Duursma from the North Melbourne Football Club. Again, there have been slight rumours coming out in the last week or so that Duursma is actually really unhappy at North and doesn't believe that he's been given a fair opportunity and believes that he could actually make a bigger mark on another team. And again, with other teams probably looking to maybe offer this guy a contract, there could be some, I think, negotiation going into this offseason. I definitely feel like Zane Duursma, if North aren't really too happy with what he's done so far and he's not happy with them, you never really know. He could genuinely become a target. Again, it says former pick 4 Zane Duursma is reportedly fed up with the lack of opportunities he's getting at North Melbourne. Could Richmond swoop in and get him cheaply? The young forward has a Fife-like athletic skill set with the marking and size. Could then draft Willem Duursma and have both at the club. Again, as a lot of you guys know who watch the channel, there aren't many AFL players I dislike, right? Again, I think for me to dislike a player, it has to be for a pretty good reason. Again, I don't like Taylor Walker that much. I have never been that big of a fan of him. I thought the way he acted in the 2017 final series and always just smashing people behind play and getting away with it, especially when he was doing it against Richmond a lot, I never really liked that. He still does that to this day and it frustrates me. Again, I'm sure we all have a player or two we don't particularly like, right? I'm going to be fully honest about it. I'm not an AFL journalist or anything like that, so I guess I can be a little bit honest and say, I don't really like this guy. But again, in terms of, if you take the personality and all that out of it, and we're actually just going to talk about straight game style and how they are as players, I am very much not a fan of the Duursmas, especially Xavier. I think watching Xavier Duursma play, in my opinion, yes, he's got some very good, upsides and skills, but there are a lot of parts about his game that I really don't like. For example, this guy has a massive tendency to absolutely cook his kick. Again, I don't think I've seen a player kick it out of bounds on the full more than Xavier Duursma. I also find him very weak, and even though it seems like he tries his hardest, he often gets bodied in contests. And again, if he's going for a hard ball get against another player 9 out of 10 times, he's going to lose that. I was very scared that Willem Duursma, the one coming up in this draft that Richmond were looking at, is going to kind of be like that. Again, I don't think he is as much. But what I will say is, in the short amount of time that we've seen from Zane, I kind of feel like he does have some of the traits that Xavier has, where I think he's pretty weak. He's definitely very weak in the contest. Again, he can't play one-on-one. He's a high half forward who is taller and is sometimes expected to be like the third tall, and he can't do it because he can't play one-on-one. He can't really... Again, his contested marks are always pretty much on someone's shoulder, which again, in a positive, is really good that this guy can absolutely leap and take a great mark. But again, I'm not fully sold on Zane Duursma, but in saying that, we got to remember this guy is like 19 or 20 years old, playing arguably the hardest position in the AFL. Again, being a high half forward, especially in a bad team, is so goddamn hard to do, man. Like, you don't get that much service. And I think if you're a really good high half forward on a very good team, then that is absolutely perfect. I think a lot of the best teams in the AFL have a really good high half forward. You look at Brisbane and they have Cam Rayner. You look at, Sydney, and when they were really good, obviously Will Hayward was absolutely cooking half the time. There are a bunch of other teams that have really, really good high half forwards. And I do think that Zane Duursma still has the ability to do that. Now, in saying I think he's got a lot of weaknesses in the limited time that I've seen, the weaknesses of him being I think a little bit weaker and not being that great in the contest aren't anywhere near as bad as what Xavier has. Because in my opinion, obviously Xavier plays in the midfield, he plays in the wing, and he can play as a halfback, where you naturally just have to be, strong. You got to be courageous. You got to be, obviously very good in the contest. And I think that sometimes he doesn't do that, and his kicking really lets him down. Zane is a little bit different though, because he's a high half forward. Yes, you do have to be good at it, but honestly, he's so young, playing like the hardest position in the game. I think you got to kind of give him a chop out here. And I do think that North Melbourne, just generally over the last couple of years, have not been that good at developing younger players at all. I mean, they've been rebuilding for like 6 years, had top 5 picks like every year that I can freaking remember. I do think Zane Duursma, if the Tigers were to be interested in him, right, and I don't know what they'd have to give up for him. If North are kind of fed up with him, and it does sound like his trade value has kind of dropped, if the Tigers gave up a late first round pick in last year's draft, I wouldn't do it because of how deep last year's draft was. But if they gave up a late first round pick in this year's draft for Zane Duursma, I would legitimately think about it. And I honestly think that Zane Duursma is a player that Richmond could take a bargain on, especially considering they're bringing in a lot of high half forwards who are young, and there's not a whole lot of pressure on him, if he was to come into the team. At North Melbourne, he has a lot of pressure to be the number one high half forward and do absolutely everything. They really don't have a high half forward after him. That's why they drafted him so high and wanted him so bad. But at Richmond, they've obviously got Sammy Lawler, who is pretty much being a high half forward at this moment, who will be probably playing a very similar role. Absolutely looks the part. Again, they will probably target Harley Reid in the future, who can also play that role. Not saying they will get him. Taj Houghton will also play that role. There will be a lot of different players that can play that position. And I do think that Zane Duursma, he has a chance to come in and not have a whole lot of pressure on him and be around a bunch of other young guys who are all trying to make their mark in the league. And I mean, imagine if Richmond can get him going. Imagine if Richmond can get a goal out of him every game, maybe 12 touches and a bunch of marks leading up at the footy. Because that's what Cam Rayner does. Cam Rayner is so good at what he does, and I don't think people truly understand how good he is at being a high half forward, because his job is just to kick a goal a game, right? That's important. But he also has to really present up the line and be an option for his, backmen to kick it to, for the midfielders to kick it to. He just really has to be an option. And I don't feel like Zane Duursma's been able to do that at North Melbourne. I feel like he's really being parked as like a third tall as well, sometimes a second tall, and he comes on as a sub like every game I watch him play, and he just doesn't find a rhythm. But I do wonder at the Tigers if he is a guy who just presents up the ground more, because they'll have the stay-at-home key forwards in Jonty Fall, Harry Armstrong, Thomas Sims, Tom Lynch, whoever it's going to be, right? If they can just get him to present up the ground and do his thing and then maybe try and hit the scoreboard, the Tigers desperately need that. They need a high half forward to do that, I think really, really bad. They don't necessarily need a guy who's going to, I think their main focus isn't a guy who's going to kick 3 goals a game or anything like that, because they're hoping all their young key forwards are going to develop into that. Right now, I just think they need another high half forward with Sammy Lawler, and when Sammy Lawler goes in the midfield, they're going to need a guy there. And I think that Zane Duursma could be that option. So I think it would be interesting. It's also like they could be selecting Willem Duursma in this, upcoming draft as well, who will be a bit of a different position. I think if the Tigers do go Willem Duursma, which I'll be talking about in another video, they will be playing him as a wing. Again, he wants to be an inside midfielder. Again, I don't know if he's strong enough and his build will let him be an inside midfielder in the AFL. That's why I think his under-18s team is really trying to get him to play other positions. And I actually think he'd be a really good wing in the AFL. So if you maybe have, Zane Duursma, who can also play a little bit of wing, him and Willem maybe swapping as high half forwards and wings, and Willem has the ability to play half back as well, that'd be a really, really good thing. And I definitely feel like the Tigers could look at it. So as much as I have not been a fan of, Xavier Duursma and how he's played, and I haven't been a fan of what I've seen out of Zane so far, I think there's easily enough time to turn it around for Zane, especially if he went to a team like Richmond, who I think would be way more beneficial for him than North Melbourne. But again, I'd very much like to hear all of your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Should the Tigers go for Zane Duursma or should they not? Again, I'd very much like to know. Subscribe to my gaming channel, which will be linked down below. My sports channel, which is this one for all latest AFL content and news. Comment what you guys think about the Tigers going for Zane Duursma. Is it a good idea or is it not? And I guess I'll be seeing you guys next time. Goodbye.